Chapter 16. The Oompa Loompas. Oompa Loompas, everyone said at once, Oompa Loompas! Imported direct from Loompaland, said Mr. Wonka proudly. There's no such place, said Mrs. Salt. Excuse me, dear lady, but Mr. Wonka, cried Mrs. Salt, I am a teacher of geography. Then you'll know all about it, said Mr. Wonka. And oh, what a terrible country it is! Nothing but thick jungles infested by the most dangerous beasts in the entire world. Hornswogglers and snozzwangers and those terrible, wicked wangdoodles. A wangdoodle would eat 10 Oompa Loompas for breakfast and come galloping back for a second helping. When I went out there, I found the little Oompa Loompas living in tree houses. They had to live in tree houses to escape from the wangdoodles and the hornswogglers and the hornswogglers and the snozzwangers. And they were practically starving to death. They were living on green caterpillars, and the caterpillars tasted revolting. And the Oompa Loompas spent every moment, they were practically starving to death. They were living on green caterpillars, and the caterpillars tasted revolting, and the Oompa Loompas spent every moment of their days climbing through the treetops looking for other things to mash up with the caterpillars to make them taste better. Red beetles, for instance, and eucalyptus leaves, and the bark of the the bark of the bong tree, all of them beastly, but not quite so beastly as the caterpillars. Poor little Oompa Loompas! The one food that they longed for more than any other was the cacao bean, but they couldn't get it, and Oompa Loompa was lucky if he found 3 or 4 cacao beans a year. But oh, how they craved them! They used to dream about cacao beans all night and talk about them all day. You had only to mention the word cacao to an Oompa Loompa, and he would start dribbling at the mouth. I wonder how Mr. Wonka knows all this, guys. Maybe he spent a long time visiting the Oompa Loompas instead of such a short time as he mentions. The cacao bean, Mr. Wonka continued, which grows on the cacao tree, happens to be the only. Sorry. I wasn't checking the next page 76. Sorry. Happens to be the thing from which all chocolate is made. You cannot make chocolate without the cacao bean. But the cacao bean is chocolate. I myself use billions of cacao beans every week in this factory. And so, my dear children, as soon as I discovered that the Oompa Loompas were crazy for this particular food, I climbed up to their treehouse village and poked my head in through the door of the treehouse belonging to the leader of the tribe. The poor little fellow looking thin and starved was sitting there trying to eat a bowl full of mashed up green was trying to eat a bowl of mashed up green caterpillars without being sick. Look here, I said, speaking not in English, of course, but in Oompa Loompish. Look here, if you and all your people will come back to my country and live in my factory, you can have all the cacao beans you want. I've got mountains of them in my storehouses. You can have cacao beans for every meal. You can gorge yourself silly on them. I'll even pay your wages in cacao beans if you wish. You really mean it? Asked the Oompa Loompa leader, leaping up from his chair. Of course I mean it, I said. And you can have chocolate as well. Chocolate tastes even better than cacao beans because it's got milk and sugar added. The little man gave a great hoot-whoop of joy and threw his bowl of mashed caterpillars right out of the treehouse window. "It's a deal!" he cried. "Come on, let's go!" So I shipped them all over here, every man, woman, and child in the Oompa Loompa tribe. It was easy. I smuggled them over in large packing cases with holes in them for them to breathe, of course, right? Yeah. And they all got here. And they all got here safely. They are wonderful workers. They all speak English now. They love dancing and music. They are always making up songs. I expect you will hear a good deal of singing today from time to time. I must warn you, though, that they are rather mischievous. They like jokes. They still wear the same kind of clothes they wore in the jungle. They insisted upon that. The men, as you can see for yourselves across the river, wear only deer skins. The women wear leaves, and the children wear nothing at all. Oh, poor children. The women use fresh leaves every day. "Daddy!" shouted Veruca Salt, the girl who got everything she wanted. "Daddy, I want an Oompa Loompa. I want you to get me an Oompa Loompa. I want an Oompa Loompa right away. I want to take it home with me. Go on, Daddy, get me an Oompa Loompa." Now, my pet," her father said to her, "we mustn't interrupt Mr. Wonka." "But I want an Oompa Loompa," screamed Veruca. "All right, Veruca, all right, but I can't get it for you this second. Please be patient. I'll see you have one before the day is out." "Augustus!" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus, sweetheart, I don't think you had better do that." Augustus Gloop, as you might have guessed, had quietly sneaked down to the edge of the river, and he was now kneeling on the river bank, scooping hot, melted chocolate into his mouth as fast as he could. Da-da-da-da! Chapter 17. Augustus Gloop goes up the pipe. When Mr. Wonka turned round and saw what Augustus Gloop was doing, he cried out, "Oh no! Please, Augustus, please! I beg of you not to do that! My chocolate must be untouched by human hands!" "Augustus," called on Mrs. Gloop, "didn't you hear what the man said? Come away from that river at once!" "This stuff is terrific," said Augustus, taking not the slightest notice of his mother or Mr. Wonka. "Oh boy, I need a bucket to drink it properly." "Augustus!" cried Mr. Wonka, hopping up and down and waggling his stick in the air. "You must come away! You are dirtying my chocolate!" "Augustus!" cried Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus!" cried Mr. Gloop. But Augustus was deaf to everything except the call of his enormous stomach. He was now lying full length on the ground with his head far out over the river. This chapter makes me hysterical with laughter, lapping up chocolate like a dog. "Augustus!" shouted Mrs. Gloop, "you'll be giving that nasty cold of yours to about 1,000,000 people all over the country." "Be careful, Augustus!" shouted Mr. Gloop. You're leaning too far out." Mr. Gloop was absolutely right, for suddenly there was a shriek, "Eee!" and then a splash, and into the river went Augustus Gloop, and in 1 second he had disappeared under the brown surface. "Save him!" screamed Mrs. Gloop, going white in the face and waving her umbrella about. "He'll drown! He can't swim a yard! Save him! Save him!" "Good heavens, woman," said Mr. Gloop, "I'm not diving in there. I've got my best suit on." Augustus Gloop's face came up again to the surface, painted brown with chocolate. "Help! Help! 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 Help!" he yelled. "Fish me out!" "Don't just stand there," Mrs. Gloop screamed at Mr. Gloop. "Do something! Do something!" "I am doing something," said Mr. Gloop, who was now taking off his jacket and getting ready to dive into the chocolate. But while he was doing this, the wretched boy was being sucked closer and closer toward the mouth of one of the great pipes that was dangling down into the river. Then all at once the powerful suction took hold of him completely, and he was pulled under the surface and then into the mouth of the pipe. The crowd on the riverbank waited breathlessly to see where he would come out. Oh no! There he goes! Somebody shouted, pointing upwards, and sure enough, because the pipe was made of glass, Augustus Gloop could be clearly seen shooting up inside it head first like a torpedo. Help! Murder! Please! Screamed Mrs. Gloop. Augustus! Come back at once! Where are you going? It's a wonder to me, said Mr. Gloop, how that pipe is big enough for him to go through it. It isn't big enough, said Charlie Bucket. Oh dear, look, he's slowing down. So he is, said Grandpa Joe. He's going to stick, said Charlie. By golly, he has stuck. He's going to stick, said Charlie. I think he is, said Grandpa Joe. By golly, he has stuck, said Charlie. It's his stomach that's done it, said Mr. Gloop. Now, guys, let's stop for a moment. So, doesn't this part make y'all think that Charlie is not paying attention much to his grandfather? Yeah, I think he's just speaking to nobody in particular. Just a fun fact there. All right, let's continue. He's blocked the whole pipe. Said Grandpa Joe. Smash the pipe, yelled Mrs. Gloop, still waving her umbrella. Augustus, come out, Augustus, come out of there at once. The watchers below could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe, and they could see the watchers below could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe. I checked again. That's good for the on page 81. And they could see it building up behind him in a solid mass. And they could see it building up behind him in a solid mass, pushing against the blockage. Pushing against the blockage. The pressure was terrific. Something had to give. Something did give, and that something was Augustus. Woof! Up he shot again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. He's disappeared, yelled Mrs. Gloop. Where does that pipe go to? Quick, call the fire brigade. Keep calm, cried Mr. Wonka. Keep calm, my dear lady, keep calm. There is no danger whatsoever. Augustus has gone on a little journey, that's all, a most interesting little journey, but he'll come out of it just fine. You wait and see. How can he possibly come out just fine? Snapped Mrs. Gloop. He'll be made into marshmallows in 5 seconds. Impossible, cried Mr. Wonka. Unthinkable, inconceivable, absurd. He could never be made into marshmallows. And why not? May I ask? Shouted Mrs. Gloop. Because that pipe doesn't go to the marshmallow room, Mr. Wonka answered. It doesn't go anywhere near it. That pipe, the one Augustus went up, happens to lead directly to the room where I make a most delicious kind of strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge. Then he'll be made into strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge, screamed Mrs. Gloop. My poor Augustus, they'll be selling him by the pound all over the country tomorrow morning. Quite right, said Mr. Gloop. I know I'm right, said Mrs. Gloop. It's beyond a joke, said Mr. Gloop. Mr. Wonka doesn't seem to think so, cried Mrs. Gloop. Just look at him. He's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy's just gone up the pipe, you monster! She shrieked, pointing her umbrella at Mr. Wonka as though she were going to run him through. You think it's a joke, do you? You think that sucking my boy up into your fridge room like that is just one big colossal joke? It's a joke! He'll be perfectly safe, said Mr. Wonka. He'll be perfectly safe, said Mr. Wonka, giggling slightly. He'll be chocolate fudge! Shrieked Mrs. Gloop. never!" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Never!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Of course he will!" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "I wouldn't allow it!" cried Mr. Wonka. "And why not?" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Because the taste would be terrible," said Mr. Wonka. "Just imagine it! Augustus' favorite chocolate-coated gloop. Ugh, yeah, I wouldn't like that either. No one would buy it. No one would buy it. They most certainly would," cried Mr. Gloop indignantly. I don't want to think about it," shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Nor do I," said Mr. Wonka. "And I," said Mr. Wonka, "and I do promise you, madam, that your darling boy is perfectly safe." "If he's perfectly safe, then where is he?" snapped Mrs. Gloop. "Lead him to him this instant." Mr. Wonka turned around and clicked his fingers sharply. Click, 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 3 times. Immediately, I can't click my fingers, snap my fingers, so I just said it. Yeah, it's strange. Even though I'm 10 and almost 11, like 10 and a half, I still can't snap my fingers. That's so weird. Immediately, an Oompa Loompa appeared, as if from nowhere, and stood beside him. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was gold brown, and the top of his head came just above the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. He wore the usual deerskin slung over his shoulder. "Now listen to me," said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. "I want you to take Mr. and Mrs. Gloop up to the fudge room and help them to find their son, Augustus. He's just gone up the pipe." The Oompa Loompa took one look at Mrs. Gloop and exploded into peals of laughter. "Oh, do be quiet," said Mr. Wonka. "Control yourself. Pull yourself together. Mrs. Gloop doesn't think it's at all funny." "You can say that again," said Mrs. Gloop. "Go straight to the fudge room," Mr. Wonka said to the Oompa Loompa, "and when you get there, take a long stick and start poking around inside the big chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll inside the chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll find him in there. But you'd better look sharp. You'll have to hurry. If you leave him in the chocolate mixing barrel too long, he's liable to get poured out into the fudge boiler, and he's liable to get poured out into the fudge boiler, and that really would be a disaster, wouldn't it? My fudge would become quite unedible." Mrs. Gloop let out a shriek of fury. "Eee! I'm joking," said Mr. Wonka, giggling madly behind his beard. "I didn't mean it. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, Mrs. Gloop and Mr. Gloop. Goodbye. I'll see you later." As Mr. and Mrs. Gloop and their tiny escort hurried away, the 5 Oompa Loompas on the far side of the river suddenly began hopping and dancing about and beating wildly upon a number of very small drums. "Augustus Gloop!" they chanted. "Augustus Gloop! Augustus Gloop! Augustus Gloop!" "Grandpa!" cried Charlie. "Listen to them, Grandpa. What are they doing?" "Shh!" whispered Grandpa. "I think they're going to sing a song." "Sing us a song." "Augustus Gloop!" chanted the Oompa Loompas. "Augustus Gloop! Augustus Gloop!" The great big greedy nincompoop! How long could we allow this beast to gorge and guzzle, feed and feast on everything he wanted to? Great Scott! Great Scott! It simply wouldn't do. However long this pig might live, we're positive he'd never give even the smallest bit of fun or happiness to anyone. So what we do in cases such as this, we use the gentle touch, and carefully we take the brat and turn him into something that will give him great pleasure. Will give great pleasure to us all. A doll, for instance, or a ball, or marbles, or a rocking horse. But this revolting boy, of course, was so unutterably vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile. He left the most disgusting taste inside our mouths, and so in haste. Ugh, we choose a thing that, come what may, would take the nasty taste away. Come on, we cried. The time is right. The time is ripe to send him shooting up the pipe. He has to go. It has to be. And very soon he's going to see inside the room to which he's gone. Some funny things are going on, but don't, dear children, be alarmed. Augustus Gloop will not be harmed, although of course we must admit he will be altered quite a bit. He'll be quite changed from what he's been. When he goes through the fudge machine, slowly the wheels go round and round, the cogs begin to grind and pound. Anyway, bin and machine don't rhyme. It would have been if they would have rhymed, we would have said bean, and that's what Angelica Fox said when she was recording this video. So, but I shouldn't say the things. I shouldn't say the way words aren't pronounced. So, I think she's Indian or something. That's why. Anyway, let's continue. The cogs begin to grind and pound. 100 knives go slice, slice, slice. We add some sugar, cream, and spice. We boil them for a minute more until we're absolutely sure. See, for more and sure to rhyme, you'll have to say sure, not sure. That all the greed and all the gall is boiled away, and that all the greed and all the gall is boiled away for once and all. Then out he comes, and now by grace a miracle has taken place. This boy who only just before was loathed by men from shore to shore, this greedy brute, the slouse's ear is loved by people everywhere. For who could hate or bear a grudge against a luscious bit of fudge? Yay! So again, you have to say allows ear. You have to say everywhere, not everywhere. So yeah. I told you they love singing, cried Mr. Wonka. Aren't they delightful? Aren't they charming? But you mustn't believe a word they said. It's all nonsense, every bit of it. Are the Oompa Loompas really joking, Grandpa? Asked Charlie. Of course they're joking, answered Grandpa Joe. They must be joking. At least, I hope they're joking, don't you? Yeah, I hope you're joking too. All right, let's continue with Chapter 18, Down the Chocolate River. Off we go, cried Mr. Wonka. Hurry up, everybody. Follow me to the next room. And please don't worry about Augustus Gloop. He's bound to come out in the wash. They always do. We shall have to make the next part of the journey by boat. Here she comes. Look. A steamy mist was rising up now from the great warm chocolate river, and out of the mist there appeared suddenly a most fantastic pink boat. It was a large open rowboat. I keep clearing my throat. I'll have to drink water in just a moment. Maybe it's because I was shrieking a lot. With a tall front and a tall back. So let me read that from the beginning. It was a large open rowboat with a tall front and a tall back, like a Viking boat of old. And it was of such a shining, sparkling, glistening pink color that the whole thing looked as though it were made of bright pink glass. There were many oars. There were many. How could there be ears on a boat? I must be so silly. There were many oars on either side of it, and as the boat came closer, the watchers on the riverbank could see that the oars were being pulled by masses of Oompa Loompas, at least 10 of them to each oar. Well, they didn't say the number, or Roald Dahl didn't say the number of the oars on the boat, so we can't guess how many Oompa Loompas there were to each oar, but Angelina Fox predicted there were 100 because she apparently thought there were 10 oars. So here we go. This is my private yacht, cried Mr. Wonka, beaming with pleasure. I made her by hollowing out an enormous boiled sweet. Isn't she beautiful? See how she comes cutting through the river. I was thinking it was a question, but no, statement said. Anyway. Okay. The gleaming boiled sweet boat glided up to the riverbank. 100 Oompa Loompas rested on their oars. Yep. So there are 10 to each oar, and stared up at the visitors. Then suddenly, for some reason best known to themselves, They all burst into shrieks of laughter. What's so funny? asked. What's so funny? asked. What's so funny? asked Violet Beauregard. Oh, don't worry about them, cried Mr. Wonka. They're always laughing. They they think everything's a colossal joke. Jump into the boat, all of you. Jump into the boat, all of you. Come on, hurry up. As soon as everyone was safely in, the Oompa Loompas pushed the boat away from the bank and began to row swiftly downriver. Okay, hold on, let me drink some water and then I'll continue. Hold on, guys. Sorry for the thirstiness of my buddy. Alright, now I'm good. Hey there, Mike TV, shouted Mr. Wonka. Please do not lick the boat of with your tongue. It'll only make it sticky. I'm sorry, guys. This is the first time I've drank water in the middle of a chapter, so let's continue. Daddy, said Veruca Salt, I want a boat like this. I want you to buy me a big, pink, boiled sweet boat, exactly like Mr. Wonka's. And I want lots of Oompa Loompas to row me about, and I want a chocolate river, and I want... She wants a good kick in the pants, whispered Grandpa Joe to Charlie. The old man was sitting in the back of the boat, and little Charlie Bucket was right beside him. Charlie was holding tightly onto his grandfather's bony hand. bony old hand. He was in a whirl of excitement. Everything that he had seen so far, the great chocolate river, the waterfall, the huge sucking pipes, the candy meadows, the Oompa Loompas, the beautiful pink boat, and most of all, Mr. Willy Wonka himself had been so astonishing that he began to wonder whether there could possibly be any more astonishments left. Where were they going now? What were they going to see? And what in the world was going to happen in the next room? Isn't it marvelous? Said Grandpa Joe, grinning at Charlie. Charlie nodded and smiled up at the old man. Suddenly, Mr. Wonka, who was sitting on Charlie's other side, reached down into the bottom of the boat, picked up a large mug, dipped it into the river, filled it with chocolate, and handed it to Charlie. Drink this, he said. It'll do you good. You look starved to death. Then Mr. Wonka filled a second mug and gave it to Grandpa Joe. You too, he said. You look like a skeleton. What's the matter? Hasn't there been anything to eat in your house lately? Not much, said Grandpa Joe. Charlie put the mug to his lips, and as the rich, warm, creamy chocolate ran down his throat into his empty tummy, his whole body, from head to toe, began to tingle with pleasure, and a feeling of intense happiness spread over him. You like it? asked Mr. Wonka. Oh, it's wonderful, Charlie said. The creamiest, loveliest chocolate I've ever tasted, said Grandpa Joe, smacking his lips. That's because it's been mixed by a waterfall, Mr. Wonka told him. The boat sped on down the river. The river was getting narrower. There was some kind of a dark tunnel ahead. There was some kind of a dark tunnel ahead. A great round tunnel. A great round tunnel that looked like an enormous pipe. And I wasn't sure to say a great round tunnel or a great round tunnel. I wasn't sure I wasn't sure about putting the emphasis on the round or on the tunnel. So anyway, and the river was running, so I chose to put it on the round. And the river was running right into the tunnel. And so was the boat. Row on! Shouted Mr. Wonka, jumping up and waving his stick in the air. Full speed ahead! Oh, Miss Linda, my O&M teacher, told me to never wave my can in the air, to always put it in the ground. Maybe Mr. Wonka doesn't know the rules and skills of orientation and mobility and is not following, because he sure isn't following that rule. And with the Oompa Loompas rowing faster than ever, the boat shot into the pitch dark tunnel and all the passengers screamed with excitement. Yahoo! Yay! How can they see where they're going? Shrieked Violet Beauregard in the darkness. There's no knowing where they're going, cried Mr. Wonka, hooting with laughter. There's no earthly way of knowing which direction they are going. There's no knowing where they're rowing, or which way the river's flowing. Not effective light is showing, so the danger must be growing. For the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing. He's gone off his rocker! Shouted one of the fathers aghast. And the other parents joined in the chorus of frightened shouting. He's crazy! He's crazy! They shouted. He's balmy! He's nutty! He's screwy! He's batty! He's dippy! He's dotty! He's daffy! He's goofy! He's beany! He's buggy! He's wacky! He's loony! He's buggy! He's wacky! He's loony! No, he is not, said Grandpa Joe. Switch on the lights, shouted Mr. Wonka, and suddenly, on came the lights, and the whole tunnel was brilliantly lit up, and Charlie could see that they were indeed inside a gigantic pipe, and the great upward curving walls of the pipe were pure white and spotlessly clean. The river of chocolate was flowing very fast inside the pipe, and the Oompa Loompas were all rowing like crazy, and the boat was rocketing along at a furious pace. Mr. Wonka was jumping up and down in the back of the boat and calling to the rowers to row faster and faster still. He seemed to love the sensation of whizzing through a white tunnel in a pink boat on a chocolate river, and he clapped his hands and laughed. And see. I was clapping, so I didn't see the words. And he clapped his hands and laughed and clapped and kept glancing at his passengers to see if they were enjoying it as much as he. Look, Grandpa! Cried Charlie. There's a door in the wall! It was a green door, and it was set into the wall of the tunnel just above the level of the river. As they flashed past it, there was just enough time, just enough to read doesn't make sense, to read the writing on the door. Storeroom number 40, it said. All the creams, dairy cream, whipped cream, violet cream, coffee cream, pineapple cream, vanilla cream, and hair cream. Hair cream? Hair cream, cried Mike TV. You don't use hair cream. Well, maybe he got the chance to read it too. He and his father and mother. Row on, shouted Mr. Wonka. There's no time to answer silly questions. They streaked past a black door. Storeroom number 71, it said on. Let me see what can. Storeroom number 71, it said on it, whips, all shapes and sizes. Whips, cried Veruca Salt. What on earth do you use whips? What on earth do you use whips for? For whipping cream, of course, said Mr. Wonka. How can you whip cream without whips? Whipped cream isn't whipped cream at all. Whipped cream isn't whipped cream at all. Whipped cream at all unless it's been whipped with whips. Just as a poached egg isn't a poached egg unless it's been stolen from the woods in the dead of night. Row on, please. Maybe he doesn't understand the meaning of whipped cream. Maybe it's not even whipped. Maybe it's just called whipped cream just because. They passed a yellow door on which it said, Storeroom number 77, all the beans, cacao beans. Oh, hint, hint, hint. There's the storeroom in which Mr. Wonka keeps his cacao beans. Cacao beans, coffee beans, jelly beans, and has-beans. Has-beans, cried Violet Beauregard. You're one yourself, said Mr. Wonka. There's no time for arguing. Press on, press on. But 5 seconds later, when a bright red door came into sight came into sight ahead, he suddenly waved his gold-topped cane in the air and shouted, "Stop the boat!" Chapter 19. The Inventing Room, Everlasting Gobstoppers, and Hair Toffee. When Mr. Wonka shouted, "Stop the boat!" the Oompa Loompas jammed their oars into the river and backed water furiously. The boat stopped. I thought the river was completely made out of chocolate. The Oompa Loompas guided the boat alongside the red door. On the door it said, "Inventing Room, Private. Inventing Room, Private. Keep out." Mr. Wonka took a key from his pocket, leaned over the side of the boat, and put the key in the keyhole. "This is the most important room in the entire factory," he said. "All my most secret new inventions are cooking and simmering in here. Old Fickelgruber would give his front teeth and Fickelgruber would give his front teeth to be allowed inside just for 3 minutes. So would for 3 minutes. So would Prodnose and Slugworth and all the other rotten chocolate makers. But now, listen to me. I want no messing about when you go in. No touching, no meddling, and no tasting. Is that agreed?" "Yes. Is that agreed?" Yes. The children cried. We won't touch a thing." "Up to now," Mr. Wonka said, "nobody else, not even an Oompa Loompa, has ever been allowed in here." He opened the door and stepped out of the boat into the room. The 4 children and their parents all scrambled after him. Don't touch!" shouted Mr. Wonka, and don't knock anything over." Charlie Bucket stared around the gigantic room in which he now found himself. The place was like a witch's kitchen. All about him, black metal pots were boiling and bubbling on huge stoves, and kettles were hissing, and pans were sizzling, and strange iron machines were clanking and sputtering, and there were pipes. Spluttering, not sputtering. And there were pipes running all over the ceiling and walls, and the whole place was filled with smoke and steam and delicious, rich smells. More pipes, huh? How many pipes are there in the whole factory, guys? My gosh. Mr. Wonka himself had suddenly become factories, guys, my gosh. Factory. Mr. Wonka himself had suddenly become even more excited than usual, and anyone could see that this was the room he loved best of all. He was hopping about among the saucepans and the machines like a child among his Christmas presents, not knowing which thing to look at first. I even read that without checking, huh? I'm a genius. Anyway, let's continue. He lifted the lid from a huge pot and took a sniff. Then he rushed over and dipped a finger into a barrel of sticky yellow stuff and had a taste. Then he sipped and had a taste. Then he skipped across to one of the machines and turned half a dozen knobs this way and that. Then he peered anxiously through the glass door of a gigantic oven, rubbing his hands and cackling with delight at what he saw inside. "This is my favorite room." Then he ran over to another machine, a small shiny affair that kept going put. And every time it went put, a large green marble dropped out of it into a basket on the floor. At least it looked like a marble. I wonder if the basket is attached to the machine, or if Mr. Wonka just took out a random basket from one of the rooms in his factory and put it there under the machine. So what was I gonna say? I forgot what I was gonna say. Anyway. "Everlasting Gobstoppers!" cried Mr. Wonka proudly. "They're completely new. I am inventing them for children for children who are given very little pocket money. You can put an everlasting gobstopper in your mouth, and you can suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it, and it will never get any smaller. It's like gum, cried Violet Beauregard. It is not like gum, Mr. Wonka said. Gum is for chewing, and if you tried chewing one of these gobstoppers here, you'd break your teeth off. But they taste terrific, and they change color once a week, and they never get any smaller. They never disappear, never. At least I don't think they do. There's one of them being tested this very moment in the testing room next door. And Oompa Loompa is sucking it. He's been sucking it for very nearly a year now without stopping, and it's still just as good as ever. Now over here, Mr. Wonka went on, skipping excitedly across the room to the. No, I'm sniffing. I'm having so many problems right here. Oh, I was gonna say, when I was talking about those gobstoppers, I was gonna say Roald Dahl didn't say if the basket was just attached to the machine, or if Mr. Wonka just took it from a random room in his factory and put it on the floor. I was gonna say that Roald Dahl didn't say that. Didn't say if it was or wasn't. Some of my questions here are so many of my questions are unanswered in this book. I'm a child, guys, who wonders a lot because my dad says I'm his little scientist because he's a meteorologist, as you know. I'm sure I've repeated that fact to y'all a million times. Over here, I'm inventing a completely new line in toffees. He stopped beside a large saucepan. The saucepan was full of a thick, gooey, purplish treacle, boiling and bubbling. By standing on his toes, little Charlie could see inside it. Little Charlie is a perfect name for him because here it says he has to stand on his toes. Well, I could probably see into that pan if I didn't stand on my toes, because since I'm 10 and a half, almost 11, as I just told you, unless it's a very high pan. A very high shelf. That's hair toffee, cried Mr. Wonka. You eat just one tiny bit of that, and in exactly half an hour, a brand new, luscious, thick, silky, beautiful crop of hair will start growing out all over the top of your head, and a mustache and a beard. I need that because, I'm pretty growing much of a beard. but it's a great subject for my dad, because I'm telling you, he doesn't cut his beard very often. You'll see him. You'll see it the next time y'all meet him when we get to do a gathering, as I hoped when I sent you a video with my thank you for the brownies. A beard, cried Veruca Salt. Who wants a beard, for heaven's sake? Well, she's crying a beard because she's a girl. Girls don't have beards. It would suit you very well, said Mr. Wonka, and Mr. Wonka's inventing this because he's a man. He will have a beard. Well, because I think he tore his beard. Grandpa Joe said he tore his beard in chapter 4 or something, and that's why he's inventing this hair toffee for himself, but maybe also for other boys like me. It would suit you very well, said Mr. Wonka, but unfortunately the mixture is not quite right yet. I've got it too strong. It works too well. I tried it on an Oompa Loompa yesterday in the testing room, and immediately a huge beard started shooting out of his chin, and the beard grew so fast that soon it was trailing all over the floor in a thick, hairy carpet. Wow. It was growing faster than we could cut it. In the end, we had to use a lawnmower. Wow, to keep it in check. But I'll get the mixture right soon, and when I do, there'll be no excuse anymore for little boys and girls going about with bald heads. But Mr. Wonka, said Mike TV, little boys and girls never do go about with. Don't argue, my dear child. Please don't argue, cried Mr. Wonka. It's such a waste of precious time. Now over here, if you will all step this way, I will show you something that I am terrifically proud of. Oh, do be careful. Don't knock anything over. Stand back. Chapter 20, The Great Gum Machine. Well, stand back, Angelina Fox said like that. Stand back. And I said it, and I decided to copy her expression of reading and say it like that as well. Anyway, let's continue. Mr. Wonka led the party over to a gigantic machine that stood in the very center of the inventing room. It was a mountain of gleaming metal that towered high above the children and their parents. Out of the very top of it, there sprouted hundreds and hundreds of thin glass tubes this time, and the glass tubes all curled downwards and came together in a bunch and hung suspended over an enormous round tub as big as a bath. Again, I wondered if that tub is attached to the machine, or if Mr. Wonka used Oompa Loompas to get the tub from one of the rooms of his factory to another. Or maybe he bought it anyway from Walgreen or something. Well, I don't know if he ever went to go Walgreen to get all these materials, but maybe he invented them. Yeah, he invented them. I think he invented the tub and those baskets the baskets that's hanging over the machine, dropping gobstoppers in. All right, so here we go! Cried Mr. Wonka, and he pressed 3 different buttons on the side of the machine. A second later, a mighty rumbling sound came from inside it. Grrr! And the whole machine began to shake most frighteningly. Whoa! And steam began hissing out of it all over. Tss. And then suddenly, the watchers noticed that runny stuff was pouring down the insides of all the hundreds of little glass tubes and squirting out into the great tub below. Old Belle says everything's great. And in every single tube, the runny stuff was of a different color, so that all the colors of the rainbow and many others as well came sloshing and splashing into the tub. It was a lovely sight, and when the tub was nearly full, Mr. Wonka pressed another button, and immediately the runny stuff stopped running out of the tubes. The rumbling sound disappeared, and a whizzing, whirring noise took its place. And then a gigantic whizzer started whizzing round inside the enormous tub, mixing up all the different colored liquids like an ice cream soda. I thought that the gum machine would start mixing all the liquids when they first came out of the tubes and down from to the tub and everything. So here, guys, the adventure of gum that never loses its taste is coming for you in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here we go. Gradually, the mixture began to froth. It became frothier and frothier, and it turned from blue to white to green to brown to yellow, then back to blue again. Watch, said Mr. Wonka. Click went the machine, and the whizzer stopped whizzing. And now there came a sort of sucking noise. And very quickly, all the blue frothy mixture in the huge basin was sucked back into the stomach of the machine. There was a moment of silence. Then a few queer rumblings were heard. Brrr, Then silence again. Then suddenly the machine let out a monstrous mighty groan. And at the same moment a tiny drawer, no bigger than the drawer in a slot machine, popped out of the side of the machine. And in the drawer there lay something so small and thin and gray that everyone thought it must be a mistake. The thing looked like a little strip of gray cardboard. The children and their parents stared at the little gray strip lying in the drawer. You mean that's all? Said Mike TV, disgusted. That's all, answered Mr. Wonka, gazing proudly at the result. Don't you know what it is? There was a pause. Then suddenly Violet Beauregard, the I don't know. I don't know if they'll ever say that they close this drawer, so I better close the drawer. I just used one of my dad's drawers to make the sound effect. Sorry. Then suddenly, Violet Beauregard, the goofy gum chewing girl, let out a yell of excitement. "By gum! It's gum!" she shrieked. It's a stick of chewing gum. "Right you are!" cried Mr. Wonka, slapping Violet hard on the back. "It's a stick of gum! It's a stick of the most amazing and fabulous and sensational gum in the world!"